You'll miss the introduction. Now, in all of this madness, I set down my glasses. Huh? Golly. They're new. I was just telling Nick, I spent $200 something on examining glasses, and I still can't see. To blow everything up 300%. All right. So I don't know if we don't need the soundboard on. I'm wearing this so that for the live stream, whoever is tuning in or wants to watch later can do that. And I appreciate you all for sitting up front. Well, ask 9 out of 10 Baptists where to sit, and they're going to tell you in the back. So here we are in the front, and I appreciate that too. So we're going to go through the book of Ezekiel, and I have no clue as to how quickly we will do this. It'll be quicker than our last study, I promise.
I don't think we can.
Yeah. So much of Ezekiel, the intriguing portions of it that we're used to are the spinning wheels on the chariot and the dry bones and a few other passages that are R-rated that everybody gets excited about and that sort of thing. But for scholars that study Ezekiel, the use of vocabulary is very unique. And there's a lot of words that are only used in Ezekiel, and they're only used once. And a lot of them, they don't know where they came from. They're compound words from two different cultures, some words. And so we are going to spend some time just looking at that because it does add to the interest of the book. But I don't want to get too nerdy as we go through. We can get lost in it for hours and really not accomplish anything as far as the application of what we're doing. And I do want to focus on that as we go along. So what I've given you is an introduction to the book. And I thought you really have to know the background in order to appreciate what Ezekiel or any prophet is doing. But I think especially in Ezekiel, because so much of what he writes, at least early on, are visions that have him carried back to Jerusalem while they're in exile in Babylon. So he's a little different than other prophets. So knowing what's going on in and around is very important. So the book of Ezekiel, I'm just going to go through these notes, is set against the turbulent final decades of the kingdom of Judah, southern Israel. So a little further back, everybody understands that when Rehoboam took the kingdom over from his father Solomon, that he wanted to be a ruthless king. And so instead of following the wise sages of his day, he decided to take the advice of the young whippersnappers and created problems. Jeroboam rebelled, took the northern tribes with him. They immediately sunk into idolatry. And so as a result, God punished them at the hands of the Assyrians. They were carried into exile, and to this day they're considered the lost tribes of Israel because they were never reconstituted back as tribes in the land of Israel. So that's the divided kingdom. So when it mentions here the kingdom of Judah, speaking of the southern kingdom, which were only two tribes, obviously Judah and then Benjamin. And that's where Jerusalem was. They considered themselves, after the split of the kingdom, they considered themselves the true Israel because they had maintained Jerusalem as their place of worship. Fast forward that to New Testament days, Samaritans were those that lived in what was once the northern kingdom, okay? And they were considered half-breeds by those that had come back from the exile and reestablished Jerusalem as a place of worship. So they would not let the Samaritans come and worship in Jerusalem because they were not purebred Judites. And so that created the tension that we find in the New Testament. So all of this activity dovetails together and just continues to create problems. So all of this, the final decades is the late 7th to early 6th century BC. You have to kind of keep in mind that the calendar counts backwards. Okay, so when it says late 7th century, it's talking about 722. And then early 6th century would be in the what we would consider, the 690s, 680s, 670s. All right, this was the era of the Neo-Babylon Empire's rise, which ended Judah's independence and established and initiated the Babylonian exile. The context involves shifting alliances among Judah, Egypt, and Babylon, with Judah caught in the geopolitical crossfire after the collapse of the Assyrian Empire. So the Babylonians take over the Assyrian Empire. They conquer them. They were a vassal state. They rose up against Assyria, conquered them. Okay, so their enemy in the neighborhood was Egypt to the south. All right, so Babylon to the north, Egypt to the south. Guess who's caught in the middle? Israel or Judah. And so they played all kind of games trying to maintain allegiances with Egypt. They would rebel against first their Assyrian bosses, and then later their Babylonian bosses. They would make alliances with Egypt that Egypt never would follow up on. They never came in when they were supposed to protect Judah. And so they depended upon these earthly human alliances. All the while, other prophets before Ezekiel were telling them, where's your trust in God? Trust in God. He's going to fight your battles. He's going to take care of you. They never believed it. They did all the wrong things. And so that's what kind of gets us to this point here. All right, so Judah has tried to court Egypt. It did not work, and all it did was make Nebuchadnezzar mad. All right, so as we'll see, there were 3 different incursions by the Babylonians into Israel. All 3 involved exile. And finally, the siege upon Jerusalem was the backbreaker, and they destroyed everything. So just a few of the Judean kings. These were all descendants or relatives of King Josiah, who died in 609 BC, and presided over Judah's decline. So Josiah, good king, okay, he was killed at Megiddo by the Egyptian forces under Necho II. He was trying to block Egyptians' northward movement as a part of his alliance with Assyria, if I'm remembering, or it may have been Babylon. Jehoaz was deposed by Necho and taken to Egypt, where he died. So Egypt invaded Judah. They became a vassal state of Egypt. Jehoaz was taken off into Egypt and died. Jehoiakim was installed by Necho as a puppet, initially paid tribute to Egypt, but switched alliance to Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar victory at Karamesh, where he defeated the Egyptians. He later rebelled against Babylon, leading to the first siege of Jerusalem. So Jehoiakim thought that he was just going to go take on Babylon on his own. And they sieged Jerusalem and resulted in in exile at that time. Jehoiakim, surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar during the second siege. He and thousands of elites, including Ezekiel, were deported to Babylon in 597 BC. All right. Then Zedekiah. He was the last one. He was another son of Josiah, installed by Nebuchadnezzar as a vassal, broke his oath of loyalty by allying with Egypt, who's trying to make a comeback. This triggered the final siege, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, and the third wave of exiles. So that kind of gives the overall background there. The Egyptian kings, there were only two. Necho II killed Josiah, briefly had control of Judah, was defeated by Nebuchadnezzar at Carchemish, and he ended Egyptian dominance in the Levant. If you ever see the word Levant, it means that's the fertile land there. That's Israel. I don't know how to say that next Egyptian's name. So him and Hophra formed an anti-Babylonian coalition. Hophra promised military aid to Zedekiah, but failed to deliver when Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, leading to Judah's ruin. So actually, when you look at the broader history, Egypt had the opportunity at that point to defeat the Babylonians for various reasons, and they chickened out. And as a result, Judah paid the price. Okay. Yeah. Then you have the Neo-Babylonians, and they were the dominant force of the day until the Persians showed up. So here's Nabopolassar. That's a South Louisiana way or Southern way of saying that. I'm sure it's said differently. Founded the empire by rebelling against Assyria and allying with the Medes to destroy Nineveh. So Nineveh was the headquarters of Assyria. The Babylonians. So the Assyrians, that is, I'm trying to give you a modern map of things. So Jordan, Syria, that area were the Assyrians. That's where they originated from. Then the Medes are what we would call the people that would live in Iraq today. So they were a desert people, a nomadic people. They had no interest in settling anywhere, having a kingdom per se. They liked to fight, and anybody that was fighting, they were ready to join in. And that was kind of their role in the world. And they took a bounty for it. They were mercenaries to a large degree. So Nebuchadnezzar II, he was their greatest ruler, defeated Egypt at Carchemish. Besieged Jerusalem twice, once in 597 and once in 586. So he ceases in 587, and that's when Judah decides, we'll go along. We're gonna be a vassal state. And a year later, they decided they would team up with a trying up and coming Egypt, and that's when they finally got defeated, and so did Egypt. They destroyed the temple, deported the Judean elites. He rebuilt Babylon magnificently, but is remembered in the Bible primarily for the judgment on Judah. Later kings during Ezekiel's later ministry included Marduk. His nickname was Evil Merodach. So I thought that was funny. That's his nickname. Who released Jehoiakim from prison, followed by brief reigns of Neriglissar and others until the empire's fall to the Persians in 539. So this was kind of the activity. Egypt's meddling, Babylon's conquest, Judah's vacillating kings couldn't make up their mind, created the crisis of exile that frames most of the Ezekiel story. So we're going to just look at some of this material we'll look at repeatedly. I actually put this together from about 15 different sources. And I couldn't really make up my mind what I wanted to leave out, so I left it all in. So Ezekiel's name means God strengthens. He was a priest, it says in the text, and a member of the 597 deportation. That was the middle one, the second deportation. He lived among the exiles by the Chebar Canal, which was an irrigation canal near Nippur in Babylonia. So I can't remember if it has its genesis point in the Tigris or the Euphrates, but there were several canals they have discovered that they would dig off these main rivers and irrigate the desert. And this was one of those. They had been sent to settle in this irrigated area and basically develop it. That's what Nebuchadnezzar was expecting from them by being there. Unlike earlier prophets, he ministered entirely in exile, beginning at the age of 30. We believe at the age of 30. There's a lot. We'll look at that a little bit tonight about the dates at the beginning of this. And on his 5th year of captivity, his wife died during his ministry, which is recorded in Ezekiel 24. And he used dynamic symbolic acts to convey God's word. This guy acts out more of what God's going to do and has done in the craziest ways. That's why I said this morning, he was custom made for social media, YouTube, and that kind of thing. It just would have been great if he was around today. All the stuff. Oh, really? Oh, there's stuff going on all the time. Yeah, and one of the reasons I think that is because he has so many different visions, and he's enacting these things that are very kinetic, and then they actually happen. And then Ezekiel shifts gears when they actually does happen, and he becomes comforter. So he's a prophet of judgment, which is very active. And then when he becomes their comforter, he's extremely active. Yeah. 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 I think, and that's what I would think. Yeah. And this is, there's portions of this that you'll think, boy, he sure is repeating himself a lot when it comes to the judgment part. But he's Ezekiel, when he's writing, is making a fair case for everybody that's rebelled against God. And this is obviously pointed at Judah for their idolatry. But the whole world's idolatrous. And nobody gets to escape simply because they weren't the chosen people of God. Everybody falls under this judgment. But at the same time, consolation is available to everybody. You know, yeah. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, on both sides of the coin. Let's see. The book is one of the most precisely dated in the Old Testament, with 13 dated oracles tied to the years of Jehoiakim's exile. So unlike other prophets where you kind of have to really do a lot of guessing, this one's nailed down, except for the opening numbers, nailed down pretty well. It spans roughly 22 to 25 years. The structure divides into 3 major sections, and we'll find as we go along, Ezekiel does not move chronologically. It moves thematically. And so we have to get that out of our head. We're so used to looking at things like this chronologically, and that's not what's going on. It's much like if you studied the book of Revelation, when you do not study it chronologically, but you study it thematically, you begin to get the gist, I think, of what Revelation's trying to teach. This is the same thing. So 1 through 24, it's his call and the judgments against Judah before the fall of Jerusalem. And And then 25 through 32 are oracles against the foreign nations, which is the part that probably hadn't been 6 sermons preached out of 25 through 32 ever. Everybody just skips right over that part. But we're going to take a look at it. Yeah. And then 33 through 48 are the messages of hope and restoration. And you have heard a lot of sermons probably preached out of those passages. So the messages of hope and restoration, after news of Jerusalem's fall reaches the exile, which is in about January of 585, the final dated oracle is in 571. The great temple vision occurs in 573, which is the 14th year after the city's fall. Those are probably my favorite chapters in all the book. It's not purely chronological, as I mentioned, but the dates anchor it firmly in history. So not only in this history, but also briefly in some Masoretic texts from Babylonian period. Ezekiel prophesied alongside Jeremiah, who was in Jerusalem, and Daniel, who was in Babylon, but in the Babylonian court, covering the period from the first deportation to the eve of Nebuchadnezzar's death. So for a very long time, these 3 were at work. Why did he write this book? It is because of the crisis following the 597 deportation. Exiles lived in refugee settlements, stunned by the loss of their homeland. We all know the covenant promises. And they all thought, as long as we have the covenant promises, nothing could ever happen to us. Until something did happen to them. And the ones that get carried off think that they don't know what to think. Other than, well, the ones that were left in Jerusalem must be the ones that God favored and were blessed. It turns out, not nearly the case. So he lived in these refugee settlements. They lost their homeland, the temple, and their king. Many clung to the false hope that Jerusalem would soon be restored, or that Egypt, would rescue them. The book's turning point comes at 585, when survivor reports Jerusalem's destruction. This is in Ezekiel 33. So what was unspeakable and could not even happen has happened. Only then does the tone shift, and I believe dramatically, in the way that it shifts, in language and style and everything. But there certainly was not 2 Ezekiels. As some, look, you read Isaiah, you're very tempted to say there had to be at least 2 Isaiahs that make up the book of Isaiah, but 1 Ezekiel for sure. The primary purpose was to vindicate God's holiness and sovereignty in the eyes of the shattered people. Who is in control? All right, that is a question that is asked and is answered in various ways. Ezekiel explains why the catastrophe happens. Judah's persistent idolatry, and out of that flows all sorts of things. Social injustice, covenant unfaithfulness. All of this had provoked God's judgment. He demolishes their false optimism. The days are prolonged and every vision fails. We'll get to in a couple of weeks. While preparing the exiles for long-term survival in the foreign land. They really did. They got there and said, well, this can't last forever. We're the chosen people. And Jeremiah's telling them, you might as well get used to it. You know, you're going to be there a long time. Let's see, after the fall, his purpose becomes pastoral, offering hope that God is not finished with Israel. And this is where a lot of practical application rises up for our own lives. Restoration will come not because Israel deserves it, but, as God says several times, for the sake of my holy name. The book defends God's reputation before a watching world. Yes, sir.
So, Brother
No, it's different. So, no, this is after that. So when you're thinking 40 years, you're thinking of the 40 years with Moses wandering in the desert. This is a century. This is a millennia later. Okay? Yeah. So the kingdom's been divided, and it's been utterly destroyed. And the reason why is because God is holy, and they were worshiping other gods, plain and simple. And we'll get into some of the horrid details. One thing about Ezekiel, if they were to make a movie from Ezekiel today, you don't know if it would be an R or maybe even MA. It's pretty graphic because he wants to be sure they understand the depth of their idolatry. And I think that's important when you're so almost naive about their situation. That they're never going to find their way out of it because they're so naive. They're so entrenched in it that they don't even realize. His style, the visions, the symbolic acts, the repeated refrain, you, they will know that I am the Lord. He says that nearly 70 times. He says that in confrontation, but also in his consolation. So we're going to look at a few of the theological values that we'll be uncovering as we go through. The glory or the kabod of the Lord is mentioned over and over again. It opens with this vision of God, the departure of God's glory from the temple, its eventual return to the temple. The idea also is that God's presence is not confined to Jerusalem. That was one of the main things that God is making clear. Just because you're in exile doesn't mean you're escaping what I'm doing to Jerusalem, because you're doing it too. So this all becomes equal opportunity for those that choose to participate in idolatry. Yes. Yeah, there's and then there's the remnant that's involved in all of this, where we have no other reason to believe that they're chosen other than they're chosen. Because there's nothing to say except we're going to look at a couple of passages where he talks about those that grieve over what's happening and how special they are to God. So we'll be looking at that. Divine sovereignty and holiness. God's in control over history, over the nations, and over his judgment. He acts to sanctify his name. Okay, you've made it an abomination, I'm going to sanctify it. That's 36. The phrase, you will know that I'm the Lord, again, underscores this whole thing. Individual responsibility. Chapter 18 rejects the proverb that fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge, insisting each person is accountable for their own sin, and so, since they are, can do their own repenting, which is of worth to us. What's that? I pulled this out of Nelson's introduction to this, and he wrote the Word Biblical Commentary, because he uses it to say, and the proverb was around at the time of Ezekiel. It was still being used in the New Testament. And what he's saying is that the proverb says the sins of the fathers is experienced by the children, is the point of the proverb. And he's saying, not in this case. He says everybody's responsible for what they've done, for the horrendous nature of it. Judgment and restoration. Early, there's certain doom for sin, and then later ones promise a new heart, a new spirit, resurrection of the nation, victorious over enemies. So we'll get into Gog and Magog toward the end of this, and that's the other passage that everybody loves because it Revelation refers backward to Gog and Magog. A renewed temple with a river of life, and all of these point to an ultimate renewal, an eternal renewal. Those are the most messianic and eternal passages, I think, in the book when it begins to speak of the river and its flow. God's faithfulness despite Israel's failure. So this is something that we'll learn in this that we don't always look at. God made a covenant with his people. And we know how it came about. You've heard me preach on it now in the last year 4 times. And he makes this covenant, and Abraham has to do nothing to participate in the covenant. God does everything. But when we read those passages carefully, God says, now if, and there's that big word if, that is there, and we find that it shows up a lot when God is saying he will do something if Jesus does the same thing. So the message doesn't change. We have a responsibility to the covenant. What will never change is God's intent that he cemented in that covenant. And so the people misunderstood God's intent and allowed themselves to be led into a life of idolatry, letting their lives be of use to anything that came around. So the way that I describe that today is just being open to everything the world has to offer in hopes that it will in some sort of way satisfy, what we are searching for. And that's what happened here. And of course, being open to the world is going to always get us in trouble because it knows nothing of the will of God. It knows nothing of the purposes of God or the love of God or any of those things. Okay, so that failure that they had was really a misunderstanding of the covenant, number one, and then the overwhelming lack of discipline that allowed these other gods to take precedence, even in the temple that had been dedicated to God. So we look at all of these things, and that's their failure, but God's faithfulness is what? He's going to fulfill the intent of his covenant. All right? But it still means that we have to, at some level, express gratitude for being a part of that covenant. And so when we get to Christ, finally, that becomes more clear than it obviously was for these folks for 700 and something years. So Ezekiel bridges the pre-exilic prophet's warnings with post-exilic hope. So the people were warned, they didn't listen, it all happened, and Ezekiel's there saying, see what happens when you do these kind of things, and then ultimately provides the comfort that they need because they will return home. And home has to mean more this time around than it had ever meant before. All right, so prophets contemporary to Ezekiel. I mentioned Jeremiah. He was in Jerusalem, and then later he was carried off to Egypt. So Jeremiah served as God's spokesman, warning Judah of impending judgment due to their idolatry, their covenant unfaithfulness, and social injustice. Same thing I said earlier. He called for repentance, but foretold the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by Babylon as divine discipline. So after the fall, he offered messages of hope, including the promise of a new covenant written on the heart. We've all read Jeremiah 31. And the 70-year exile followed by restoration. So his book, Lamentations, emphasizes God's faithfulness amid catastrophe and the personal cost of prophetic obedience. So he's often called the weeping prophet. he starts out reluctant, but then if he doesn't prophesy, his bones are on fire. He wants to speak so badly. Then there's Daniel. He's in Babylon, and then again under Persia. So he's there. He overlaps between the Babylonian and the Persian rule. He was in the royal court. He was deported in the first wave and received visions, interpreted dreams, revealing God's sovereign control over world empires and history. And so his book encourages faithfulness under pagan rule. In his visions, it reveals future kingdoms and how God deals with those folks. And even has visions that we most are familiar with. Daniel 7, speaking of the Son of Man and his, it's often considered a foretelling, a foreshadowing of Christ's resurrection and that whole story. All right, and then Habakkuk, likely late 7th, early 6th century. He was in Jerusalem in the area somewhere. Habakkuk wrestled with the problem of evil with a holy God. Habakkuk's a really interesting book. He asked God a lot of questions. Why is it this way? Why does it have to be this way? When are you going to do something about it? He's very inquisitive to God as to what's going on, and why a holy God would use somebody wicked like the Babylonians to judge Judah. So he kind of goes through this whole book. He warns of the coming judgment while expressing trust in God's ultimate justice and sovereignty. So Habakkuk's he's asking the questions that Ezekiel's kind of answering through what he's telling the people are happening. Ultimately, God answers Habakkuk and says, basically, why are you asking me this? This is how I chose to do it, and I'm doing it. And then Obadiah. How many of you have ever read Obadiah? Not many people have read Obadiah. It pronounces judgment on Edom. When Judah is defeated, Edom kind of gloats over it and goes in and kind of starts ransacking the place. So Edom was who? That was Esau's descendants. So they're brothers to the Israelites. And so that's why there's some unsavory things mentioned about their judgment. That they were happy over Judah's destruction, and they're reminded that's their brother. And then finally, two more that aren't. One's not mentioned in our Bible. Huldah, she was a prophetess. She was active for a short amount of time in Josiah's reforms, but I can't find her name in our Bible. But in Second Temple Judaism writings, she is mentioned. And then Zephaniah was also a part of Josiah's early reign and warned of all this stuff. Okay, any questions about that? It's a lot. I'm going over rather quickly because introductions are kind of boring, but it does provide, I hope it's providing the background you need. Yes, sir. The temple was destroyed about the middle of Ezekiel is when we find out that the temple is destroyed.
It was rebuilt again and destroyed again?
Yes. So this was Solomon's temple that was destroyed, all right? And it stayed in ruins pretty much until Herod the Great, which began his project in the 16 BC. And he begins to rebuild the temple. And a lot of people say it was more fabulous than Solomon's temple. Yeah. And then, of course, in 70 AD, that was torn down by the Romans. And so now it's never been rebuilt. All that we have is a portion of a wall. Yes. Yes. Same location.
Why not the other Bible prophets? Remember my mind's going is our big farmer.
Yeah, Amos was before this. And, well, actually, Amos, I know why. I'll tell you why. Because we're not mentioning any of the prophets that prophesied to the northern kingdom. And that was a lot of them. Amos he was Judean, but he prophesied to the northern kingdom. So we didn't mention any of those because they've been out of the picture for over 200 years now. I know. It seems like it's a compact time period, but there's hundreds of years here that this is going on. Yeah. Especially when you see that some of these kings didn't last 3 months. And they got replaced with another one. I mean, it's so many of them. All right, so the outline that's there, we'll begin a little bit in chapter 1 tonight, just looking at the first 3 or 4 verses. I don't have any notes on that tonight. You'll get the full set of notes on. We'll do chapter 1 through 3. I'll have notes on 1 through 3. I don't know if we'll get through the whole 3 chapters next time, but we'll have them in case we can. But he has his vision, and he's called to his ministry, is what the first 3 chapters are about. 4 through 24 involves all kinds of prophecies of judgment against Judah and Jerusalem. In every style, every manner, every use of language you can imagine, he just over and over again. So the symbolic acts we'll take a quick look at as we go through those. The oracles of doom, that's what every commentary calls them. The oracles of doom. Judgment on the mountain of Israel and the land. Okay, so what we'll find in all of this is God's plan always is creation or redemption. That's the 2 things. Redemption is just another form of creating. And we find in these oracles that he's just deconstructing creation and redemption, one verse after the other, after the other, after the other. So if you look under there, the vision of the temple's abominations, which are pretty terrible. Further signs and messages of judgment. So we go through all of these, and especially chapter 16. The chapter numbers are to the side there, but when we look at all of these, that's 12 chapters of just every kind of way of describing how bad they were, and every kind of way of describing how painful and destructive their death is going to be. So he pulls no punches. And then the section culminates with the beginning of the final siege. When we get to that point, when we get to 24, we'll probably spend the week after that talking about siege warfare so that we really get an idea about how horrible that was. We read it and we don't think that much about it. But this was a terrible way to be punished for your sin. And it really does give you pause to think just how fortunate we are that, we look at Jesus on the cross and thank goodness we didn't have to go through that. Thank goodness you never had to go through siege warfare. Yeah, we don't have a clue. And well, yeah, Masada, what I understand about the history of Masada was it was under siege, but they all...
And how they were trying to survive.
Yeah.
Being taken.
Yeah.
How they, for so long, how they won
Till the end, they knew they were done. Yeah. Yeah. They weren't going to be taken. That's right. Right. It's Second Temple writes a lot about, there's several.
It was supposedly back.
Yeah. No, it was. It was one of the longest sieges ever. And they didn't starve to death. It was. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the oracles against the foreign nations. So I mentioned earlier, nobody gets off here. Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, they're not even involved in this siege. They're not participants with Babylon. But while Ezekiel's at it, he just lets them all know, That's right. Judgment of Tyre and Sidon, judgment of Egypt. All of the nations that are in the Levant or adjacent to it, all those that may in some way border the nation of Israel, they are all getting their just judgment predicted for them or prophesied for them. Babylon is omitted, from the list of direct judgment, because why? God's using them. He's using them to accomplish His will at this point. Now, do they get theirs later? They do, when Persia rises up and takes them. And other prophets speak of their downfall. Then there's the prophecies of hope and restoration that will come from 33 to the end of the chapter. He recommissioned as a watchman, and the fall is confirmed, meaning Jerusalem has fallen. Then the promises of restoration for Israel. And I'll list those passages there and how they're normally studied together. Victory over their enemies. So there's some prophecy about that involving Gog and Magog. Gog defeats the final invasion to sanctify His name. God defeats, can't see anything. So that battle obviously becomes important because John refers back to it as having significant meaning in the last day. And then the vision of the new temple and the restored land. And those are going to be our favorite passages. They're just at the end. Yeah. So if there's a movement, it's not chronological. It's glory revealed, judgment deserved, judgment on the nations, and then the glory returns. So it's kind of a chiastic model there, if you want to look at that. Okay, that's the end of the outline. That's all I've got for that tonight. Any comments or questions about that? Yeah, we're gonna be looking a lot at some New Testament passages as we go along. Well, I'm going to go ahead and use the Christian Standard as our main study, but I will also be using the Net Bible and the Lexham English Bible, which I have on my computer. And the reason why is because they each three deal with some of these curious words that I mentioned earlier. They interpret them differently. So we'll look at all those different interpretations when they come along. Yeah, that's Hebrew. Yes. That whole thing means whirlwind. So, well, I'll give you a little lesson here.
I went to a Hebrew class where we were learning how to read and say Hebrew in a church. I went for a couple times, but it was excellent. That was something really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, that's really big, huh?
No, it's not.
Is that, no, that's okay? Like that?
There we go.
All right.
Left, right to left.
Yeah, they go right to left.
Right to left. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whirlwind is the wind that's alive. It's
The Holy Spirit
yeah. So the whirlwind
is the Holy
is interpreted and using different words.
Spirit. Okay.
So we will look at this text a lot. This is the theological word book of the Old Testament. And for me, it's kind of the definitive Old Testament dictionary.
Yeah.
Those two words together, it's the moving wind or the active wind or the alive wind. All of those things could also mean spirit, can mean breath. Okay, so in some translations, that whirlwind may be described as a spirit. All right, rarely breath in Ezekiel, because he's either referring to it as part of the Godhead, or the activity of the Godhead, or some sort of force that is being acted upon him to do something. So we'll see later where it says he was carried in the Ruach. Well, we don't know. Ruach is wind, breath, or spirit. So some will interpret it wind, some will interpret it spirit. I think we went through all this in our divine realm several times about the different way that Ruach is used. And we will get into, there's two passages in Ezekiel that has God, the glory of God that is manifested as a man, and the Spirit at work. So you actually have in two passages in Ezekiel the Trinitarian idea of God at work, without it being described as that. It doesn't make any other sense unless it's that way. So wind it's used often, and the ru is to breathe. Ruach is to breathe the air. So that's how it gets that. Its literal meaning
Yeah.
is breath, but its metaphorical meaning in Bible carries
like
for it the
spirit?
spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from time to time, as we're going through this, I'm going to turn on the interlinear so that we can. It's easier to look up words through the interlinear than it is through the English. And then other times I will turn it off, and so it doesn't look so muddled. All right. So
You know what we recently saw, we're wrapping up our tomorrow study. She had us take some of the Greek words. And when we don't know a clue about Greek, but she had us look at them in the Greek and then flip them, which in the Greek means something else when it's written the other way, but how it's so applied to like somebody's name or evil or something, and how just because it was the same strokes. I don't know what else to say, because I'm thinking this is not an alphabet.
Well,
I mean, I'm thinking A, B, C, D.
and the Hebrew does that too.
Yeah, that you can flip.
There's an
that.
entire study.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there looking at what you were just doing. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
look at all that, but if you flip all
Flip it,
that,
yeah.
that's where my mind was going. What does whirlwind mean if we flip? Maybe you're not supposed
Well,
to do
no,
that.
I know, because Tim Mackey, who does the Bible Project, and some others, they really get into it, and for me it illustrates how people were so into their scripture
Yeah.
that these kind of writings were built in
Well,
to
writings
increase the
mattered so
depth and
much
breadth
then.
of it. Yeah.
I mean, we have it all everywhere, but it mattered to them if they got right, and if you got a handwritten scroll
Yeah.
or something, you had gold.
Well, and what then what you going to do with your time?
Yeah.
I mean, really, you only milk a goat so often. Then you got to go do something else. Jacob had babies, or his wives and concubines had babies. But all right, so in the 30th year, in the 4th month of the 5th day of the month, while the exiles were by the Kabar Canal, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. So this 30th year always raises the question, 30th year from what? Okay. So we don't really know. It doesn't say. Daniel Brock's explanation is that it is his birthday. It's his 30th year. He says that because if you were in the family of prophets and you were studying to be a prophet, and studying, what I mean is you're in training all the time. This is where your life is focused. On the 30th year, you were given responsibility. You were recognized as one who had the right to prophesy. So it could mean in the 30th year, meaning in the 30th year of my life, in the 4th month, okay, on the 5th day of the month, while I was with the exiles, the heavens were open, okay? Then, on the 5th day of the month, in the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's exile. So that's a pretty cut and dried day. You can
want me to know when.
yeah. You can find that one on the calendar.
Yeah, this took place.
Yeah. So, not to skip what's going on here, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. All right? So, that line, heavens were opened, is not to just be passed over, because the vision that he describes is one of looking into heaven. All right?
Is that kind of like in Revelations, like she was saying, the heavens are open, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, the word here, the visions I saw,
Okay,
translated into Greek, it's going to be the same word that John uses.
I was wondering, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, talking about, was he, Ezekiel, a prophet when he was exiled, or was he exiled and then became a prophet?
Good question.
Well, good question. Nobody knows.
Oh,
Because, we could possibly figure it out. He was exiled in 578, and so we could maybe do a little math and come up with a birthday. His
Raised in Judah.
30th year from, it was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's exile, so we know what day that is, and then, so we take add 5 to that, and then work yourself backwards.
He was clearly being probably groomed.
He was certainly an elite, because in the first and second exile, they took what was considered elite people.
Right.
And then the third one, whoever was left. And the only people they left were people that were to maintain the land in some sort of way. So it wouldn't just go totally to nothing. So there were some that were left, even after the third wave.
Okay.
So
Go-
there was 3 waves of exile?
Yeah.
So when you say exile and they took the best, what do you mean? Who took?
Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he goes in and
Rounds them up?
he says, you know what? You're now my vassal state, and I'm taking all your leaders back to me. So you couldn't function without leaders. That was the idea. So we're taking all the best. You're going to be left here. You're the blue collar. You're just going to get by. There's nobody there to plan to rebel,
Yeah, to lead.
because all the smart ones he takes back with him,
Rise up against him.
and he treats them very well because
Wasn't that the Hebrew children and Daniel where they?
yeah,
put-
Shadrach, Meshach, and to bed we go.
They took them to pick their brains, if you
Yeah.
will, or,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they recognized knowledge.
Yeah.
They recognized a lot of things about these people were very valuable. They took them back. And then the people that were left couldn't organize themselves, you know.
So when you say exile, they didn't just bring them and throw them out in the middle of nowhere. They took them back to their country with them.
That's right.
Just took-
Yeah.
took
They
them
didn't
away.
take everybody, they just took their leaders.
Yeah.
And left those people.
That's
on
right.
property.
They didn't, and so they were left to work the land and do whatever. Well, problem is they didn't take all the family. So you get a brother that decides, hey, I'm going to go see Necho and see if he'll come help us out. Well, they do that. And in the process, Necho says, okay, but first you're going to help me. And they all get defeated. And they haul more of them out and put greater restrictions upon them.
So they got together and was trying to go back and recover the people that was taken?
They just thought that they were going to get out from underneath Babylon's rule. And of course, it never happened. They just kept, because God wasn't going to let it happen.
It was all
This was their
It
punishment.
was their disobedience.
Yeah.
They're the ones ones left were still worshiping
Yeah.
idols and still doing,
That's right.
yeah, and so God had to finish wiping it all out.
Yeah.
This took him way.
They never learned anything.
Yeah,
Nothing.
imagine that. Those-
I know.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So the other thing interesting here, it says the word of God came directly to the priest Ezekiel, son of Buzi. It doesn't say that he's a prophet. Okay, it calls him a priest,
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
but the priesthood you could achieve earlier. That's why the 30th year is, it just stays. You can read, I could pull up 5 different commentaries, they're all going to have 5 different ideas, and I'll have them all outlined for you when I get the notes to you, so you can kind of see
So he
why
was
it presents a problem for scholars, but it really doesn't present us with much of a problem, because we know that this happens, all this happens during Jehoiakim's reign, or now in Jehoiakim's exile. So it says that he came as the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, that's another word for the Babylonians, by the Kabar Kadal, the Lord's hand was upon him there. So the stage is set. They're in exile. They're there by the canal. They kind of down in the dumps, because they're no longer in the promised land. The temple's been taken away from them, although it has yet to be destroyed. And their only hope is that things go well in Jerusalem, for the people that are left. That's kind of where their hope is.
Yeah.
But it's not much of a hope. So that's where they are, and Ezekiel's there. And in that last line of the introduction, it says, the hand of the Lord was on him there. So we'll see the hand of the Lord on and the hand of the Lord off. And in prophetic language, that has great importance. When the hand of the Lord is upon you, that means that he's in control, he's with you. It's like a blessing. But when he removes his hand, that's when you got to watch out. All right? So Ezekiel, for all practical purposes, to say it this way, Ezekiel was his man, okay? His man on earth. And was going to lay down the law to everybody. Everybody that's in Babylon.
So at this time and I hate to get.
No, that's okay.
So at this time when they're exiled, these guys, all that group, and Ezekiel and all, they thought once they left their home country that God wasn't in control no more or nothing?
That's right.
Until God put his hand on them there.
Yeah, that's
when it
very
all
good.
has to change for them, right?
Very good point, because they thought God lived in the temple.
Yeah, that's right.
And God's back in Jerusalem, and we're over here in Babylon. So
It
they're
had to be a
totally
shocking experience.
Yeah.
We didn't think that was possible. I don't-
right. And nobody's telling them it's going to last 70 years. That's Jeremiah in Jerusalem that's providing that message. For all practical purposes, this is now life, okay? Life in exile in Babylon. And they're kind of shaking their heads, still not sure as to why did all this happen, And Ezekiel's going to let them know what happened.
So you said he either puts his hand on or takes his hand off. Why would
Yeah.
he ever take his hand off of his people?
Punish them.
Well, he has. He's taken his hand away from his people.
Well, I mean, I guess.
She
what
said
I'm-
why.
Yeah,
When he did
what
that.
I'm thinking is, if they're not practicing, I guess they were all practicing idolatry.
All of them.
Okay, so that would be reason for
Just
why he would take his
punishment.
hand off.
Right, they were all being,
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, well, God's people, if they're living like God's people, he's not gonna take his hand off of
Yeah.
them. But they weren't living like God's people.
They were living worse than pagan people.
No, we
We're going
wouldn't
to
be
find
here
out
right
as we
now.
go through this.
Yeah, none of
Yeah.
this would even be here right now if
And the
everybody was
ones
living
who
like God.
were, i.e. Daniel, he never removed. Even though they were in exile, he was with them.
Well, that's what I'm.
Well, they don't understand that.
Right, right.
This group. Daniel's different.
Yeah.
so they,
Daniel
Well,
and,
because there were some that were still maybe obeying back then.
yeah, the first wave, it seems as though those that went to the king's palace all right? Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel. We find that they are devoted. And that's the only ones that we know that are devoted,
Yeah,
okay? But we know that they are. And God honors that.
yeah. That's what my mind is.
So,
It was in exile, but it was the other kingdom.
yes, so God's not this kind of God that says, oops, you know, you did bad, you all did bad. That's why the quotation I used earlier is just because the father sins doesn't mean the children are going to pay for it. You're responsible for your own sin. You're also responsible for your own devotion. And that really doesn't change today.
Thus, the responsibility of the parents to teach the children.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because that just shows a child was learning idolatry because parents were doing idolatry.
Yeah. So I don't want to get too much further. So I can have y'all some good notes. We're going to get into,
So we can have more
I got a
questions.
question real quick.
yes,
So this is the southern part
yes,
of the country
Southern
we're talking
Kingdom.
about. Kingdom, yes. What's going on with the northern kingdom? Do they not believe in God anymore, or?
Northern Kingdom's been hauled off.
So they're totally thrown off and they're just
Yeah.
doing their own thing?
In fact, we don't know who was moved in. I don't know who was moved in
Right.
to the area of Samaria.
Uh-huh.
But this is what Nebuchadnezzar would do. And the Persians did the exact opposite. So Nebuchadnezzar would move a people out of an area and then move entirely different people into that area. So that they were unfamiliar with the land, their neighbors, this, that, and the other.
Easy to
Yeah, they
manipulate.
And it was a way to keep them
Keeping them,
suppressed.
Yeah, enslaved or whatever.
Yeah. So that's what he's doing here. He's moved them out. And so you get to somewhere you got no resources that you know about.
Right.
You know, you're told probably this is where you're going to be living, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. Make something of this place, you know. So they're kind of back in Egypt, where they're making something, and you know the slaves were building all these things for the pharaohs.
Yeah.
And it was just for the pharaohs, and Nebuchadnezzar's the same way. All right, I'm putting you here. Make a life for yourself, and because you're never going back home, you know, get used to it. And Ezekiel provides some reiteration of that, saying, yeah, you're getting everything you deserve. Don't think for a minute you don't deserve this.
Yeah.
Okay? But then Jerusalem does fall, and that's like the moment God is waiting, or the moment that happens, God is able to then say to his people, there is going to be a return. Okay? But you're not going to be returning to what you left.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay? This is going to be totally different when you go back. Hence Jeremiah's prophecy. And really, it never really gets right till Jesus.
That's where my mind is right now. Here we are, even 250 years after we were founded. Are we, I mean, I know we're not Israel, but you know what I'm saying, but how God blessed the USA, and we are 250 years later just snobbing our hands in his face.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah.
he has no choice but to judge us or something. You know, I mean, our land.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I mean, I know we're all on this side of Jesus.
Right.
We now
Right.
have Jesus, but it's like, to me, I'm just seeing all the same thing.
Well, and for them, they turned their religious practices, which were ordained by God, into cultural practices. And so when it becomes a cultural practice, you can bring all sorts of things alongside in a cultural sense, and you're filling out the breadth of your life with various things. So you can have, let's just think about one thing. Let's think about music. So you take, all right, music. It's a cultural platform in our culture. It's a foundational point. Everybody likes music. But the spectrum of that is very wide, and some people like the whole spectrum, and some people only like a little thin sliver of that spectrum. And so culturally, okay, it's all okay. It's all okay. It just depends on what you like. That's what had happened religiously, it had become a cultural thing, so that you just chose which one you wanted to do, and God would have no part of
And
that,
saying for God,
choosing
that's
any
not-
other than Him.
That's right.
Even if the choice was two, you still had to choose the one because of the relationship that He had established, and we'll read over and over again about how important that was to God when He establishes these relationships, and how He intends to complete what He started. And there's pain involved in that when we choose to try to go another way. And we find that ultimately on the cross. There was great pain that had to be dealt with in order to bring about God's intended plan. And we ask, well, why? Why is it always have to be so hard? You know, why is it that way? Well, why is it that way?
Drives you to Jesus.
We find ourselves outside an understanding of what is right for life. And it's going to be harder. It's not any punishment. It's just the facts.
Not
you know.
meaning to be a Debbie Downer, but did y'all hear the news after church?
In Shreveport,
8 children killed.
In Shreveport?
by their father.
Hand of the father.
What?
By their father.
Hand of the father.
When was this? Okay.
Today, or this morning, or last night.
Did you
Early
see the
this
interview where there was a number of the council people, and when the one woman who's the local district, she couldn't speak, and she said, I can't even talk anymore. We gotta do something, I think if I remember, mental illness and gun control. Well, then she went on about that. Well, then the next guy she put over, he came up, well, he prayed down heaven because they let him pray. She walked away. And I thought, okay, Lord, I hope she's walking away because she's brokenhearted and can't stand there. But please don't let her be walking away, because he was bringing God into the mix.
Yeah.
Because even the next guy said, we can't do this apart from Jesus. And I was going, go Shreveport. I don't know
Yeah.
if you saw that, it was on Fox News.
Well, this was in Shreveport?
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Shreveport, and it was in
That's-
Fox, it was on Fox
How many
News.
children?
Mike Johnson's hometown. I
That was
mean,
his own
Eight, yes, I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
Mark.
It's
13.
well, when we
He shot more people, but he killed.
Yeah.
His own 8 children.
we get to a later passage, and Ezekiel's speaking of the people in the temple area that are just doing all these abominable things. And then he mentions those that are grieving over it. And those are the ones that God, he tells him, you know, that you mark those folks because nothing's going to happen to them. And so it made me think, we sometimes in America, especially because we're free, we do what we want to do, we get in the habit of overlooking the very things that we know are wrong and not grieve. And I read that passage and I said, boy, I want to be one of the people that is grieving
What breaks the
for
heart of
God's
God.
world, because not just for my own selection or to be, but people that have just accepted some of this. And the answer for this woman, for anybody to say, the answer is less guns, is obviously ridiculous.
It's more
That's what I
mental
said,
health.
he'll pick
It-
up a rock. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
What
it's-
this country needs is more, mental health.
Yeah.
we do need
places to
that,
go
but they
to.
gotta have Jesus at the center.
yeah.
He's got to be the center.
Yeah, well, we have, I mean, as believers, we have to know that there's one healer,
Yes.
Yeah, but
and,
Sometimes
but care is necessary, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
Because he's given us wisdom and discernment and medicine and all of the above. So yes, we have to have that, but,
But we wouldn't need that as
If-
much.
yeah, if Jesus was the
If there
center.
was love and care
Yes.
and.
Yeah. Yes, all the more reason, the message this morning, we better be doing what Jesus has called us to go out and do. As we are going.
Was that okay this morning?
It was wonderful,
Yes, it
preacher.
was.
very good.
Yeah.
You have
We
some
have the
peeps
best preacher
Ah,
in the West.
don't do that to me.
Easy now, easy.
Trying to get on that right side.
Tony Brown, Tony, oh no, he's my buddy.
Oh, well.
Brother Mark, I know it says 622 BC for Miss Holzer. I
HIKE.
think that actually was my kindergarten teacher.
teacher.
Well, her name was Miss Hazel. I remind me.
Oh,
Is
goodness.
this going, I know you're doing a live stream, will it be out there on our site?
Yes.
If people wanna go back
Yes.
and see it tonight, for those who may wanna come later.
So Nick told me when he was turning it on. I don't know when he's turning it off. I hope it's soon, if it hadn't already. Yeah, so it'll be on
It's like,
our YouTube channel, and there's a sub under studies.